Sato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mritam Gamaya Avir Maedhi Rudrayate Dakshinangamukham Te Namam Bahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Let us sit quietly a few moments and meditate on the Supreme Spirit in any way we please.
রিভার্বটা কেটে দিন, রিভার্ব।
Bhadrang karnedhi shrunuyama devaha Bhadram pasyemakshbhiryajatraha Sthirairangae stushtvagam sastanubhi Vyasema devahitai yadayuhu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we hear with our ears what is auspicious. May we see with our eyes what is auspicious. May we enjoy with strong limbs and bodies the life allotted to us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So this morning's subject is the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And actually, it should not be this morning's subject, it should be this year's subject, this lifetime's subject. Just for the sake of a morning, it is indeed a misnomer, because this document called the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, just briefly one can say, it is the recorded conversations of Sri Ramakrishna, who lived in toward the middle and end of the 19th century, and they were recorded by one of his very faithful and erudite disciples. His name, he preferred to hide his name under the pseudonym, under the initial M. Mahendranath Gupta was his actual given name. And he used to, every night after he went back to his quarters, went back to his home or wherever he was staying at that time, he would have made very brief notes of everything that happened on that particular day. And at night he would recall all of that and write a larger description of what went on. So from these brief notes taken during the actual conversations, he was able, because of his accurate and strong memory, he was able to reconstruct what happened that previous day. And since it was recorded so quickly, it has a great deal of authenticity and was verified. The first experimental publications of a few of these notes was seen by Swami Vedananda and also by the Holy Mother, Sri Sarada Devi, and they both express great pleasure and great satisfaction, and also provided the document, or the, you could say, the seal of approval that what he had written in those documents that they saw was a very faithful and accurate description of the events that he had recorded. And other disciples of Sri Ramakrishna over the course of years. It took quite a few years for all these notes to be gathered into volumes and published. And it was always with great satisfaction that people received these, because the people who had actually been present on those days were still alive and were able to testify that indeed this was a faithful account of what happened. So although nowadays we would have preferred a recording, this was in a way better than a recording, because the recording machine has nothing positive or negative about it. It simply records the facts. But this particular individual, Mahendranath Gupta, was able to himself understand better as he went through these notes. He was able to gain more and more insight into what actually had been discussed during those classes. Not classes, but during those times when he had listened to the conversations of Sri Ramakrishna. So generally we assume and we understand that it's a very faithful reproduction of what actually went on in those sessions at Dakshineshwar, where Sri Ramakrishna had lived for so many decades. So the question is, what exactly is being discussed? What is the gospel? Gospel means the good spill, the accurate reproduction of what a great soul, a knower of what he was talking about, how he phrased it, how he described it. And this provides us with as direct a testimony as we could get, given the fact that we were not able to be there, to what was actually revealed by him. And the question was how to render that into English, because it was originally published in Bengali, and it was published very slowly. Sri Ramakrishna passed away in 1886, and the first few pamphlets probably came out perhaps somewhere around 1887, 89. Swami Vedananda and Holy Mother have testified to the earliest publication. But M continued publishing these conversations over quite a few years. And also he translated them into English. He was quite fluent in the English language, so it was not a burdensome translation to him, but it was something that he wanted to make absolutely sure was as accurate as possible. So it took a long time to really publish all of his notes. And it was just not notes, because the notes were always used. Within a day or two, the notes that he had made were used to were amplified by his memory of the recent events. So anyway, this was finally published. The last volume was published actually the last Bengali volume was also published 1932. And it so happened that on the evening on which he corrected the final publication proofs, on that very evening, he had a certain congenital physical condition. That condition flared up that very evening, and that very night, he passed away. So, in a sense, he had done that tremendous work for which he had been really brought to this world. And once he had the satisfaction of seeing the completion of that, at least in preliminary form. That was the end of his necessity here in this world, and he passed on into that realm that he was describing all through the publication. Now, all of these volumes were published in 1942, I think, were translated into English from the Bengali by Swami Vedananda. And we have the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which is the standard accepted translation into English of the notes of M. But M himself did a translation himself into English, not from what he had written actually earlier in Bengali, not a translation of the Bengali, but a rewriting of his notes, going over the brief notes that he took during his visits of Dakshineshwar, the notes he took that very day, and which he meditated on in the following night, the following few days, until he again visited Dakshineshwar. Not just those notes. It was not a translation. Those notes were published in Bengali, but when he wanted to do an English translation, he went back to the original notes. He did not translate it from the Bengali. He went back to the original notes, and by, again, meditating on and remembering those days, he rewrote these construed these notes. Just as he had done originally with the Bengali, he did the same thing with the English. And this came out as the condensed Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And these copies are again being sold, but the Gospel translated by Swami Vedananda is generally the standard work that is accepted. But this condensed gospel contains certain things that are very precious and very significant. And so some of the things that I'm going to be referring to really, basically I will use this condensed gospel as as source material for the things that I would like to put before you. Of course, you'll remember some of the incidents that I described from having read them in the published Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. But there are certain things that were not said probably with the same force or same emphasis that make it very interesting to read this M's own retranslation. So, certain things, basically I will read certain passages and you'll remember them because they are mentioned in the official published version, but there are certain other things, certain, shall we say, points of view or certain additional notes that are perhaps not found in the official translation. So, but basically I will do a lot of reading. This is generally very boring when you sit at a lecture. You don't want to hear the lecturer who's supposed to be giving a living interpretation of whatever subject is being discussed. You don't really want to hear him read. But in this particular case, the reading is so significant and it may have a different emphasis that it's worthwhile to do it this way. So I hope you will have patience. Just certain things. I'll take parts here, pieces here and there. Well, Sri Ramakrishna is talking. Well, I was talking, this is, by the way, his conversations with Vidyasagar, a great philanthropist and the owner of some schools, an educationist. He was a very well-known person in Calcutta at this time. And Sri Ramakrishna paid him a visit. He wanted to meet a noble soul like that who was dedicated to such worthwhile undertakings. Well, this is the master talking. Well, I was talking of vidya, that is knowledge. But Brahman is above and beyond vidya. Vidya is the relative knowledge that leads Godward. And he is also beyond avidya, the world, which keeps all beings away from the knowledge of God. Knowledge leading Godward is the last and topmost step of the stairs leading to the roof. The Absolute is the roof. In other words, the Absolute cannot be described. It is beyond mind and speech. So the stairs can be talked about. I go up the stairs. Each step I leave behind, I'm a little bit higher. But when I am on the roof, the description is beyond words, beyond the thought, beyond the phenomenal world. The phenomenal world is made up of that which leads Godward and that which does not. Thus, God, the Absolute, is above and beyond the phenomenal world. The Absolute is unattached to good or evil. It is like the light of a lamp. You may read the Holy Scriptures with its help. It is equally open to you to forge another man's signature in the same light. Again, the Absolute is like a snake. The snake has poison in its fangs, but it itself is none the worse for this. The poison does not affect the snake or cause its death. It is poison to others only, those whom it may chance to bite. Whatever misery, sin, or evil we find in this world is misery, sin, or evil only relative to ourselves. God, the Absolute, is not affected thereby. He is above and beyond all those things. Evil in the created is not evil to the Absolute and the unconditioned, any more than the venom in the fang of the snake is venom to the snake. God, the Absolute, is above and beyond good and evil. These are strange and very interesting things to contemplate, because they are seen not from the standpoint of our own condition as human beings who are ourselves affected by good and evil, but this is from the position of that which is eternal, that which is infinite, which is beyond the results of any action or any activity. Evil in the created is not evil to the Absolute and the unconditioned, any more than the venom in the fang of the snake is venom to the snake. God, the Absolute, is above and beyond good and evil. Yes, that being is perfectly unattached. He is not to be judged by any human standard of good and evil. His sun sheds light equally on the evil and the good. The Absolute, again, is like the unfathomable ocean. Nothing can be predicated of it. The being beyond the bounds of relativity, beyond the bounds of all existence. The last feeble attempt to describe this being, the attempt made in the Vedas, is to call him by the name of bliss everlasting, that is Satchidananda. If you are asked to describe the ocean, you stand with your mouth wide open and can only stammer, "Oh, how vast an expanse! What a never-ending succession of gigantic waves! What thunderous sound, incessant and eternal!" That is all that you can say. The utmost that Shukadeva and the holy sages like him could ever do was to see and to touch the water of this immortal sea, and just to taste a bit. Had he once gone down into that sea, he would have been merged in it, never to come back to this world anymore. So then, of course, he tells the story of the salt doll going to the ocean to measure the depth of the ocean. And the salt doll has in its hand a measuring line to measure the depth of the ocean. But as soon as the salt doll steps into the ocean, it dissolves in the ocean. It dissolves in the water. It is part of the ocean. How is it going to remain separate from the ocean to measure its depth? So what is being discussed here is the unknown or indescribable, the eternal, the infinite, whatever name you want to give it. It is avang manasagocharam. It is beyond the range of mind and speech. This is how the Upanishads describe it. As long as we try to bring it within our own understanding, we're only able to talk in terms of things related to limitation. But the reality, that which is called Brahman, which is beyond all description, how is that going to be described? So if you use descriptions to try to get some sort of a definition, some sort of a handle on these ideas, you wind up with a contradiction that the description can never be accurate enough to give you a clear idea of what it is that you're describing. So it is called avangmanasagochara, beyond mind and speech, which means that it can be experienced, but it can never be described. And the salt doll is a wonderful example of it, because when you go down to that ocean, that you consider yourself a limited being, and you want to experience the unlimited. Very good, you're the salt doll, you are walking to the ocean, and you want to measure the depth of the ocean. That's a perfectly reasonable project at that time. But as soon as you touch the ocean, the separateness with which you had identified yourself before is gone. You are merged in that which you're trying to describe. So there is no one to describe it, and there's nothing to be described, because there is nothing else. To describe something, you need the item you're trying to describe and the person who is going to do the description. So you need at least two. But that is not available. The reality is beyond one. It is Advaita. That means Advaita Vedanta is the non-dual. Sometimes people talk about monistic Vedanta. That is to say, the aspect of Vedanta which does not refer to multiplicity, which refers to unity. But some argument can be made that monism you're talking about, by using the word monism, one thing, oneness, you're implying that there's a possibility, even perhaps a faint possibility, that there may be a two-ness, a secondness. There may be a second also. So purely speaking, generally, the word non-dualism is preferred because it doesn't bring in the possibility of something else. Oneness, it may imply that there is something in addition to that, which would be two. So it's beyond mind and speech. And the salt doll, if you try to really investigate that, you become that. This is the salt doll going into the ocean. The salt doll becomes the ocean. So who is there left to describe, and what is being described? So that's why that statement is made. Ekam eva advitiyam, one only without a second, is another way it's been described. Then Sri Ramakrishna goes on. People talk glibly of the infinite, the absolute, the unconditioned, as if they had any conception of it at all. Shukadeva, that is a great ancient sage, and other holy sages were at best ants of the larger sort. He had used the example of ants coming to a hill of sugar. The ants see that there is a vast, indescribably vast to them amount of sugar, and they decide, oh, we're going to take this sugar home to our burrows. At most, they can carry 1 or 2 grains, and the rest, the huge mass of that mountain of sugar, they cannot even begin to think of carrying. So the mountain of sugar seems all but carried home by the ants. For is the ant not filled and satisfied with his meal? He has eaten a grain of sugar, and next time I'll take the whole mountain. Thus too, the deluded rationalist, he is satisfied with his ounce of reason, therefore he understands Brahman. He knows what the absolute is and what it is not. People talk glibly of the infinite, the absolute, the unconditioned, as if they had any conception of it at all. Shukadeva, that great ancient sage, Shukadeva and other holy sages were at best ants of the larger sort. If we say that they could eat up 8 or 10 particles of the sugar, we have said enough in their favor. It is just as absurd to say that God the Absolute has been known and comprehended by anyone as it is to say that a mountain of sugar has been carried home by some ants. The union between the undifferentiated, that is the universal, and the differentiated, the individualized, the union is the goal of the Vedantin. Then he describes the salt doll going to the ocean to measure its depth. So the conclusion is the salt doll could not come back and tell of the depth of the mighty ocean. Such is he who is fortunate enough to realize God the Absolute in the unfathomable depth of samadhi, which wipes out all individuality. Undifferentiated as he is, he does not come back out of the deep to tell the world the nature of God, the Absolute and the Unconditioned. For if it were ever possible, by my mother's will, that means the Divine Mother's will, for the salt doll to come back to the differentiated again, it must speak in terms of the finite, in the language of the differentiated. It must behave like an inhabitant of the relative phenomenal world. That is why the great mystery defies all attempts at explanation. The absolute and unconditioned cannot be stated in terms of the relative, the conditioned. The infinite cannot be expressed in terms of the finite. The point is that these truths can be experienced and have been experienced throughout the ages by innumerable beings who have realized Brahman, who have realized that infinite reality. But it cannot be described. It cannot be talked about without actually failing to describe what it really is. So, silence is his name. So there's a story in the Upanishads about the 2 boys who went to learn the Vedas from a teacher. And when they came back, their father asked them, "What have you learned?" And one of the 2 brothers comes back and tells their father, he quotes all the statements of the scriptures. I've learned this, I've learned that. And this is how it's described, that is how it's described. And the father says, "Thank you very much." Then he asks the younger of the 2 brothers, "Now, how do you describe what you have learned about Brahman, the ultimate reality?" And the boy simply sat silent and looked down, unable and unwilling to say anything as a description. Then the father praised him greatly, said, "Yes, you have understood that which can be experienced, that which is the reality, is beyond the range. Avang manasagotram, it's beyond the range of speech and mind." Yes, he who has true knowledge ceases to have anything to do with talk or controversy. God the Absolute is the one substance to be realized, not described or known. It is to be realized. It can be realized, but it cannot be described. It is beyond description. The salt doll can become one with the ocean, but cannot come back and describe the experience. The sign of true knowledge or realization is cessation of doubt and therefore all philosophical discussion. The differentiated soul, so long as it continues to be differentiated and walks on the lower plane, cannot as such realize the absolute. The undifferentiated alone realizes the undifferentiated. This is the true meaning of the expression, God is unknown and unknowable. All the facts of the universe, every object, every phenomenon that comes under creation, preservation, and destruction, under body, mind, and soul, under waking, dreaming, dreamless sleep, even meditation, all come under Maya. That is the world system, the world phenomenon. All these are looked upon as unreal by those who interpret the Vedanta philosophy after Shankara and the like. According to these, the Absolute is the only reality. The universe is mithya, that is to say, is not as it appears, is unreal. That is, when looked at from the point of view of the Absolute. To the Absolute or the undifferentiated, the universe and man and other creatures are unreal, for the only reality is the Absolute. When Maya is realized as unreal, the differentiated ego has been completely shaken off or effaced, so to speak. There is no trace of the ego left behind. It is perfect samadhi. It is absurd to say that the world is unreal so long as we remain convinced that we ourselves are real. A person who has not realized the Absolute cannot realize that the world is unreal. On the other hand, a saint returning from samadhi to a lower plane gets back by my mother's will. The mother is another aspect that is prime to this conception. By my mother's will, the saint returning from samadhi to a lower spiritual plane gets back his differentiated, attenuated, though purified ego. Getting back his ego, the saint is thrown once more upon the world of relativity. So long as his ego is real to him, relatively real, the world is real too, and the Absolute is unreal. This is again the salt doll phenomenon and the ocean. With his differentiated ego restored to him, he perceives the world system, that is Maya, as real. Only the ego being purified by God vision, he sees the phenomena of the universe as manifestations of the Absolute to the senses. And he sees the world, he sees Maya as either Vidya Maya or Avidya Maya. Vidya Maya leads Godward. To this belong discrimination, non-attachment, love of God, etc. Avidya leads away from God. To this belong carnality, riches, honors, work with attachment, and the rest. Now, who is a Vijnani? Vijnanis are those who have realized God in samadhi both as the impersonal or the undifferentiated and as God personal. Vijnanis have realized that it is the Absolute and the unconditioned who, as the primal divine energy, causes this differentiation into God and the world system, the soul and the universe. They have seen God both within and without and have received this revelation from him direct. God personal has said to them, I am the Absolute Brahman Nirguna of the Upanishads, realized in Samadhi. I have caused this differentiation. I am the origin of the 24 categories of nature of the human soul in the world. The personal God, creating, sustaining, destroying, and causing the differentiation, has manifested himself in various forms to those who seek the personal God, as well as to the Vijnanis as a person with three qualities. These Vijnanis, they see the world system is not an illusion, that the world system, the Vijnanis see this world system, that is the realm of Shakti or the world. But they see it as the manifestation to the differentiated but purified ego of a real being as a person who has created or from whom have been evolved the human soul and the soul of every created being, as well as this universe. This testimony is infallible because it is based upon revelation. It's not something they've imagined, it's something that's been revealed to them. The Lord revealed himself to the rishis as both personal and impersonal. Such revelations are made from time to time for the salvation of mankind, as well as for the joy of devotees. When the Supreme Being is thought of as inactive, neither creating, sustaining, nor destroying, I call him by the name Brahman, or Purusha, the male principle, the impersonal God. When I think of him as active, creating, sustaining, and destroying, I call him by the name of Shakti or Maya, or Prakriti, the female principle, or the personal God. No analogy can be perfectly satisfactory to explain the relation between the impersonal and the personal God. This is a thing to be realized alone. But in fact, the distinction between Brahman, the inactive or impersonal God on the one hand, and Shakti, the active or personal God on the other, is a distinction without a difference. The impersonal and the personal are one and the same being, even as fire and its burning property are one. You cannot conceive of fire apart from its power of burning, nor the power of burning apart from fire. They are one, even as milk and its whiteness are one. One cannot conceive of milk without the whiteness. They are one, just as a gem and its brightness are one. You cannot conceive of a gem without its brightness, nor of gem-like brightness apart from the gem. They are one, even as a serpent and its movement in a crooked line are one. You cannot conceive of the serpent apart from its serpentine, tortuous motion, nor of serpentine motion apart from the serpent. So these things, these expressions, these are all realizations that Sri Ramakrishna is describing. And then, of course, M recorded them in symbolic form, made notes of what he was hearing, and in the evening when he came back home, he would amplify all this and express it in more clearly. Then on occasion, Sri Ramakrishna would sing, and singing about the Divine Mother. Is there anyone who knows Kali, my Divine Mother? She who is the consort of the Absolute, the Spirit of eternity. Even the 6 schools of philosophy cannot get a sight of her. The yogi always meditates upon her. My Divine Mother is the most beloved of the Absolute, even as Sita is the most beloved of Rama. My Divine Mother gives birth to the universe. Now think of her greatness. She appears in her majesty in each finite being as an individual, just as she pleases. She has her own way in everything. To think that a man can know her is to think that one can swim across the great mighty ocean. People will only laugh at the idea. I understand this well enough in my mind, but alas, my heart will not see this. My heart is like a dwarf that must aspire to reach the moon. Sri Ramakrishna continues, yes, my Divine Mother is none other than the Absolute. She it is to whom the 6 systems of philosophy, with all their learned disquisitions, furnish no clue. When the differentiated ego is taken away by my Mother, there comes the realization of the impersonal in samadhi. And then it is the impersonal God, not the individual soul, that realizes the impersonal. When the ego is purified and so retained, the seeing or realization of the personal God or any of her manifestations is possible by her grace. Manifestations such as Sri Krishna, Chaitanya Deva, and other divine incarnations, or as men, women, children, all living creatures, nay, all the 24 categories. It pleases my Mother, the personal God, to efface the self in selfless samadhi. The result is the realization of the impersonal God in samadhi. Sometimes it pleases her to keep that self on in her devotees and then to appear before them as the personal God and talk to them. The key to the realization of the Absolute is with the divine person alone, the Saguna Brahman of the Upanishads, the personal God of devotees. That power of discrimination which the philosopher relies on comes from her, from my Divine Mother, the personal God. Prayer, meditation, devotion, self-surrender are all likewise derived from my omnipotent Mother. Again, the sage in samadhi is sometimes kept on in that state and sometimes not. Who keeps him on in that blessed state? Who brings him down to the lower plane of sense consciousness? Why, it is the divine person, my Divine Mother. Such a person cannot be unreal. She is the personal side of the one reality, the Absolute, the Brahman of the Vedanta. Yes, my Mother herself has declared to her children, I am the Mother of the universe. I am the Brahman of the Vedanta. I am the Atman of the Upanishads. Thus the personal God reveals herself. That revelation is proof of her existence. Again, the impersonal, undifferentiated God, the Absolute, is revealed by the personal God, that is, the personal side of God, the Absolute. The saint in samadhi cannot say anything about the Absolute. Like the salt dog getting in touch with the mighty ocean, he is lost. Nor can he, coming down from samadhi, say anything about the Absolute. Once differentiated, he is mute as to the undifferentiated. Once in the relative world, his mouth is shut as to the Absolute and unconditioned. My Mother, the personal side of the Absolute, says, I am the Absolute, the Nirguna Brahman of the Upanishads. Thus, too, revelation is the only proof of the impersonal God. However one may describe the absolute or the impersonal, one must throw one's differentiated ego into the description. His absolute is covered, so to speak, by this ego. This is Vedanta. Thank you. The subject for next Sunday is Sri Ramakrishna's contribution to interfaith dialogue. This talk will be given by Swami Tattva. On Sunday evenings, Swami Tattva holds an online class at 6 p.m. on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. The Zoom and YouTube links are available on our website's homepage, as well as in the monthly email bulletin. On Wednesday evenings, we have Vespers with meditation at 7:30 p.m. in this auditorium. On Friday evenings, Swami Tattva holds a scripture class at the Old Temple at 7:30 p.m. Please use the entrance to the auditorium on Filbert Street. The current text for study is the Bhagavad Gita. The class is also streamed on YouTube and on Facebook. Your cooperation in wearing a mask and maintaining social distance is greatly appreciated. If you would like to make an offering, a collection plate will be available on the cart at the door as you exit. There is also a mounted offering box near the auditorium door in the foyer. You and your friends are cordially invited to attend all of our services. After the lecture, there will be a question and answer session in Vivekananda Hall, and all are welcome. Om Dhyahu Shanti Antariksham Shanti Prithivi Shanti Apo Shanti Roshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Same Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is in the sky, on the earth and in the waters. The herbs, the plants, and the trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. Everything is pervaded by peace. May that infinite, universal peace enter our soul and being. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.